Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 7. It's called Unification 3. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. And what a weird rollercoaster ride this season has been in terms of quality, in terms of hopes, of optimism, of pessimism, of everything. And last week I was very conflicted with the episode overall. There was things I liked, there was things I didn't like. I think that kind of continues with this, where I appreciate a lot of the ideas and things that they try
hmm
to do in this episode. In fact, theoretically, the point of the episode is kind of something that I think needed to happen with Michael's character at some point, and
Yep.
yet I am vastly unsatisfied. And I hope that over the course of this discussion, I can get to the bottom as to why I'm completely unsatisfied.
It wouldn't be the first time. I think for me, I'm a little relieved because a lot of my fear last week was, oh god, she's leaving Starfleet. She's just gonna go off and do her own thing. And then the first minute of this episode was her going, I don't know if I belong in this uniform anymore. I was like, oh god, they're doing it, aren't they? And by the end, it's she's gonna come around on it. I'm like, okay, well at least we're not doing that.
I think I guess the execution is really my complaint. I mean, I've got other problems with this episode, but there was one moment I audibly groaned. Uh,
Go on.
well, even before I saw who it was, as soon as there was a mystery face to be revealed in the hood that beamed
Mm.
aboard, I was like, oh god, there's almost no one this could be that I'm going to recognize. That I'm not going to be annoyed that you know, had shown up that will know. So when it turned out to be her mother, it was like, well, it could have been worse, but I'm also not happy about it either.
It was a sort of thing where I'm like, well, they did set up she time traveled back to roughly around now anyway, so yeah, I buy it. It's not like annoyingly bad.
It's just something I could have done with been left behind. I didn't need I
Yeah,
didn't need her showing up again. It's one of those things that makes what's supposed to feel like a big universe feel really small. Uh, because she's run into her again, and
I get that.
I know that there's a
I mean, it is like on her home.
yeah, there's a thread to follow to kind of justify it, but I mean, there's so much that happens in movies and TV that we have to justify, and we sort of have to let go because technically we can explain it, we can wave it
Yeah,
off, but it doesn't feel
and
satisfying.
and then for most of the episode, she's just quite antagonistic, and I get it's supposed to be, oh, she's doing the tough parent thing and like making us see, the error of her ways, sort of thing, but it comes across as just like I said, antagonistic, and I'm like, don't really need to go through this. Don't really want to go through this.
Yeah. Um. So things I like in this episode, conceptually at least, the idea that when they mention this, what did they call it? I've forgotten the name of it already. The new Vulcan.
It's like Nivar or something like that.
Yeah, but basically, Vulcan and the Romulan have basically reformed as they talk about in the episode. They come from the same species, and they're kind of back together. And this is actually one of these things where they're. What it became clear once they started talking about this being Spock's like doing, and when we get the actual little clip, and they even mention Picard, like Picard's involved. I'm like, oh, I've got a funny feeling this ties into the Spock appearance on Star Trek: The Next Generation that we've not gotten to yet. So,
Mm,
uh, fair enough. That's actually probably a nice callback, and I think it's both a good thing and a bad. But I also think it's very telling that the most I've felt of anything on this show is a clip of Spock from
sure.
the old
Yeah.
show.
And also, again, we haven't got to that episode yet, so I've not seen it. But just this is almost going to sound like blasphemous to some Trek fans, but just the recent Abrams movies, the Kelvin
Mm-hmm.
timeline established a lot of this stuff with Spock and what he'd been doing for the past however many years and his history with the Romulans. So even having not seen that episode, I'd seen the big pop culture thing from recent time where I'm like, okay, I get the full context of this still, even though I haven't necessarily seen this exact clip.
Yeah, it's and this is the thing where one of my complaints with this episode actually is that they go a little too heavy on in the dialogue specifically, very heavy on references. It felt like it was doing a lot of the they talked about the needs of the many and the few, and they flipped it a little bit, or they in
It's
fact
just kind of how much Spock is like revered mythical figure almost.
the one that bothered me the most, and I think it was more the delivery than anything else, because I could see this happening, but when they get to Vulcan, uh, or the planet formerly known as Vulcan, and
Sorry,
Michael
you said that, and I just thought of Monty Python, the knights who formerly were known as the knights who said "knee."
and Michael is talking to the president and or whatever, and she says if Spock were here, if he could see this, he'd find it most fascinating. And I kind of just sighed a little bit because I felt like, okay, I get it, I get it. We're referencing, and it's one of those things where I'm sure young Spock in this show said fascinating a couple of times last season. I'm sure he did, but it came across as like, hey,
I
remember the
think
original Star Trek?
I think you get away with it more when it's actually Spock saying it, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Like last season when it was actually young Spock, him saying, "I'm like, okay, they're just establishing it. It's the same character, right?" And they're just kind of because obviously different actors, so they're just reusing verbal ticks and lines that just reinforce, okay, this is him. So I can kind of I understand the writing reason to do that when you're using a young version of the character. Here it just feels fan servicey, I guess. It's kind of where we're getting at.
Yeah. It and I felt that a few times. It really felt like kind of what I've complained about with a lot of the modern Star Wars movies, where it feels more obsessed with tying back into the original characters in their timeline.
You should be very glad you're not covering Mandalorian anymore.
Oh, I
This
I'm glad.
this week's episode in particular was a doozy for stuff that as a long term fan, very exciting. Uh, Definitely kind of made it more interconnected than maybe the show needed to be.
It's such a big universe, so many possibilities. Yeah, every story ends up tied into the same goddamn half dozen characters. Anyway, uh, and it's something this episode kind of did. Like, I love the idea of like Vulcan having changed, although I'm not so sure. It feels a little convenient plot wise that in a year spent in this future, that Michael never discovered this. And I get that. I like that she never looked up Spock. That she never actually thought to look up because this is why I don't think that seeing the Spock footage and actually seeing some Leonard Nimoy footage of Spock doesn't bother me. If anything, I think this is the one that not only defies the nostalgia but works is because okay, we've had time travel, we've had this mechanic, and don't get me wrong, I've never liked that he had the sister, and that's always felt kind of whatever. But
But we're over that now.
yeah, but her actually seeing what we think is real Spock, right? Because ultimately, no matter how good or bad any actor, whether it be the J.J. Abrams movie, whether it be season 2 of Discovery, is with their new Spock, their young hot Spock, right? Hot Spock. Um, like, he's never going to be real Spock to us. Real Spock is classic Spock, and seeing him and seeing what he became, and her having the reaction of, "Oh my god, this is what my brother was like as an old man," actually had some reverence. Now, admittedly, it's not reverence that this show earned in any way, shape, or form. It's reverence because this is real Spock, and because this is from the real Star Trek shows that
And
you know.
for the record, I just want to say when we do eventually get the Enterprise spin-off with Pike and Spock,
Mhm.
we're not going to be complaining about this every week. We're not going to complain. Oh, it's not really Spock. It's fine.
No.
We've accepted that. He's doing the best he can. He
Yes,
did a very
yes.
good job, to be fair.
He's did an alright job. I would say
I mean, a pretty good job. Then.
he's fine. He's not great. Like, he's fine.
Sure.
Um, so I like this. This and because you could argue this is just kind of nostalgia too, but in the context of time travel, her seeing her brother as an old man works, and seeing what he devoted his life to,
Hmm.
and that this is the levels of success that it achieved, which we never actually. I mean, we never get a real sense of how much he achieved it in the J.J. Abrams movie. I mean, at least, but it's been a while since I watched them, so I don't really remember, to be honest.
No, it was more from what I recall. Again, it's been a while. It was more about his failings in that movie that
Mm,
he couldn't save the Romulan homeworld ultimately, right?
yeah. Um, but Because I'm assuming the speech we see is from the Next Gen episode. It seems like it is, just from the context.
I suspect so.
Um, so conceptually, I like that. I like and I like some of the details that come around this. The idea that they left the Federation about 100 years ago, and to the surprise of Michael, it was more the Vulcan side who wanted to leave, and the Romulans wanted to stay in the Federation, which is a nice little flip on, well, everything, because the Romulans have, as they point out in this, have always been villains to them, especially at this point in the timeline to Michael and, Saru.
It's very early days.
Yeah. So, that all makes sense. In fact, they've not even seen a Romulan yet, have they?
Not in person.
No, because in Star Trek, the original series, they're surprised when they see a Romulan and it looks like a Vulcan. They're like, whoa, Spock, they look like you. And it's a big shocking moment.
They've got like a history, from what I recall. They've had history. They've still got the neutral zone exists at that point, right?
Yeah, no, it
But
does, but they don't know what they don't know what one looks like though.
Yes.
So I wonder if that's something they maybe should have actually played with more in this episode. Is that to Michael and the rest of them, it'd be like, oh wait, they look really Vulcan. I mean, it is mentioned at the start. I mean, the Admiral mentions, they came from the same species, they reunited, blah 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 blah. But maybe more of a shock to that part of it.
No, I agree. There's a few little things like that. Like the whole crew immediately switches to calling it by the new name. Like I get that. Okay, they're going to make an effort because that's the thing. But the fact that no one slips and ever calls it Vulcan was a little bit weird to me. Like,
yeah,
it's like you've all spent your entire lives knowing this planet as Vulcan, and you've been told this information, and then immediately, okay, it's fine. There's I get they're making a conscious effort to go, okay, no, this is what it's called now. We're learning, we're adapting. But I thought just one person slipping and correcting themselves would have kind of been a bit more of a human moment, I think, to add in.
Yeah, but especially throughout the first half of the episode, I felt constant references to things Spock said, or his catchphrases, things like that, just were popping up in the conversation too much, and it felt a little bit too nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Have you had another dose of nostalgia yet? Here's another one for you. And conceptually, the point of this episode is that Michael, once again, and I was very frustrated early on this episode because she kept saying, it was when she had like an opening narration as was like a montage playing. She's walking around in slow motion and she's about to have sex with Book. And part of what frustrated me here is she kept saying to Telly after this fact, and there's a bit of this in the narration as well, that she, Telly's kind of like hearing her explanation for running off and doing this, and she's saying, hey, you put me in a rough position. And Michael just sort of says like 3 times to her, I had to do it. I had to. And I'm like, I keep hearing she had to. I'm not seeing a lot of why she had to. I keep being told this was like an impulse that she had to do it. And I think what visually summed this up for me is that during the montage at the start where she ends up having sex with Book, is that she speaks for like a minute about does she belong in Starfleet anymore, or has she grown beyond that? And I thought just the visual of Book unzipping her uniform, right? And it's not even meant to be sexy. It's the symbolic thing of him taking that uniform off of her, of like what he represents to her life. That visual said everything that this narration was saying repeatedly for a minute long. And I'm like, shut all this up. The visual is more effective. And I started thinking back to the last few episodes. I'm like, how much more effective would a lot of this plot be if instead of being told repeatedly why she's doing things or that she has to do things, we just saw how much she had to do it. Show don't tell. Sometimes that is the most important thing in storytelling.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think what it boils down to is it's just a little overwritten. The ideas are in the right place. I get where they're coming from. It's just a bit overwritten in both ways here.
Do you know what it is? It's the opposite of the first few episodes where I was saying that the show felt unusually and pleasantly a little bit confident and that it was just kind of doing what it needed to do and it wasn't going too far with its things. And I think this show has always suffered from being overwritten, which is why those first few episodes felt a bit more refreshing. As we're getting deeper into the season here, into the midpoint, I'm feeling the overrating of Discovery really rearing its ugly head. And the concept of this episode is that Michael once again jumps in because they get to the planet and the president says no, we can't, because they want information on this research that the Vulcans were doing that was basically trying to like not do the same things what Discovery does with the jumping, but a different system of jumping around, like a sort of like warp gate sort of style technology. And the Vulcans, and this is the other thing that bothered me, is that the Vulcans believe that they caused the burn, and the Admiral explains us at the start is that they think that we forced them to pursue this technology and that caused the burn, and that's kind of why they left the Federation. And I'm like, wait, so Michael was here for a year trying to figure out why the burn happened, and it turns out an entire civilization blames itself for causing it? That's not something that came up in a year of investigating?
That's a fair point. I wonder how much they publicize that though, because they keep the project under lock and key. So maybe it's an internal thing in the Federation. The members at Federation base kind of know this, but no one else really knows.
See, I could buy it, but it felt really odd from a
convenient.
Yeah, there's a lot of conveniences in this. There's one in a plot that should otherwise be quite endearing that really bothered me, but so the whole thing is Michael evokes this Vulcan tradition where they have to argue this out based on logic and sort of like a hearing type of ceremony. And don't even ask me what the name of the thing was because it was some weird Vulcan name, and we'll just leave it at that.
It was like tech and then 3 more syllables.
Yes. And then we reveal the mother, who's going to be like her, not her like representation, but kind of her. She's I don't know. They're on her behalf. It's not quite a lawyer, but it's something.
Yeah, they're to kind of like almost like to vouch for her.
Yeah.
Judge of character, almost.
And we get like 3 members of the planet. One is a outright Romulan, one's an outright Vulcan, who's in the middle, and then there's another Romulan who's actually more. Think of it, 2 Romulans, one who's very. I mean, I'm barely boiling this down just to set up an image here, but think of like a really left-wing Romulan, a really right-wing Romulan, and then a Vulcan in the middle who's completely.
To be fair, that sounds very Vulcan.
Yes. And ultimately what this builds to is something that I should really like, because it's maybe the first time, at least that I can remember in this show, that we get a proper Star Trek resolution. It's almost trying to give Michael her character turn, where she makes a decision like, say, Picard might, rather than something because she believes it's the important thing to do. Because one of the things that's pointed out in this episode is that the Admiral just shrugs off that Michael shouldn't really be given any responsibilities right now. Oh no, if we present Spock's sister, maybe they'll talk to us now. We're just going to have to ignore the fact that she's in trouble right now. And I'm like, that was just the end of last episode. We can't just be sweeping that under the rug already.
It was like within the last 2 days, I think they say.
Yeah, it's such a TV thing, like a lazy TV thing to set up this situation where we should be dealing with the consequences of what the character's done, and instead just came up with an excuse to like, let's just forget that because we still want her to be the central part of the plot of this episode.
It's particularly frustrating because it's not like the writers forgot about it, because it comes up because the Vulcan Council, the Quorum, I believe they were, are like, you just disobeyed your officer again after this huge event that we all know about. Why should we trust anything you say? If you're the representative for the Federation, why would they send you?
After Michael invokes this thing, and the president's like, very well, we'll have to honor that, and hologram turns off. Saru turns to her and says, so you just took away her choice. Like, we were here to be diplomatic, and you invoked a ritual that pushes her into a corner where she has to accept it against her will. Which is the opposite of trying to build a bridge. It's not. This is like the dire, complete, total opposite of the purpose of them being here.
It's Michael in a nutshell.
Michael immediately doing what she thinks, again, is justified because she needs or wants this thing to be solved. And in theory, on paper, I should love what this episode's doing, because the whole point of this trial here is that they point out everything that all of the reasons why her character is flawed, and all the reasons why she keeps doing things willy-nilly based on her own needs, out of like acts of impulsive selfishness and whatever you want to call it. And they bring all this up. Her own mother stands and says, well, you betrayed your captain back, when you were with Giorgio. And did she not die because of that incident? It's like, technically, yes, I suppose she did. And,
Yeah.
you
Do
know,
you know what's really frustrating as well is this choice that, like she's just kind of like, hey, I got away. I got away that they have to accept this. And it's not on paper that different from Kirk or Picard, going off book, kind of going, hey, I got a loophole. I can solve this. I think the problem is because she does this a lot and it feels very selfish every time she does it, it's for her reasons, not because it's the right thing to do. It's just like, oh, this will get the result I want.
it's
Even
frustrating.
now, it kind of comes off that way.
It's frustrating because she never. She doesn't even because I think last episode when we complained about her choice to run off and do this mission, if she'd actually tried for half an episode to not and follow the order she was given, but then there was like another thing that escalated it that made it even more like pressing to her. It'd be like, okay, she tried, but something pushed her over the edge. But it wasn't even that. It's like she knew she'd already made her mind up in her head before she finished the conversation that she was going to do this.
I think okay, it boils down to two things here. It's never a last resort. It's always the first thing.
Yes, it's always the first thing she jumps to.
And the second thing is, I just said it's not that different from like Kirk and Picard going off book, whatever. The problem is they tended to work out pretty well for them when they did those things. With Michael, almost every time it goes badly, and I'm like, just stop trying. Follow the damn rules for once, you might get something done.
I mean, I would say more Kirk than Picard. Picard, I think one of the things I really appreciate about Next Gen is that Picard, unlike Kirk, because Kirk was still despite Star Trek still feeling like Star Trek in the original series, Kirk was a bit more of a traditional roguish hero in the way he tackled some things. I think Picard, and what I appreciate about Next Gen, is that he does actually diplomatically try and follow the rules to a T almost all the time.
I think, no, what I mean was with Picard, though, is there are loopholes that he's willing to kind of go through, right? Just enough wiggle room. He doesn't outright break the rules like Kirk would have done.
Anyway, so back to the trial. On paper, I should love this because it's addressing everything and basically confronting her with it and saying, "Hey, look at all these big. At least here's the biggest examples of these character decisions that you've made that have been very frustrating." I think as a viewer, because it was always presented this way without context, right from the very start of the show, and then it's all given to her like this. And then the Romulan, like the I'll just say, I don't, when I say left, I don't mean left wing. I just mean left, as in he was on the left in the screen, right? He was on the left of the screen. That Romulan starts saying, basically, look, I kind of disagree with you. I think we should give over this information on the science project because we can get to some sort of discovery here. We get to some sort of thing that exonerates us because we believe that we were responsible. This is good for us, and it starts this dispute amongst the three of them. And they start essentially fighting, and because the whole premise of this, and one of the things we find out is that the whole like sisterhood that her mum's a part of, is that basically for Romulans and Vulcans to trust each other, and because Romulans were always so secretive, always covert, always being sneaky, that it had to be about this absolute trust, and they were always about this complete honesty, and all of this was to preserve the peace amongst their people. The idea that their planet was a strong, unified whole that could not be faltered. And within minutes, Michael is starting to break this down. And I started laughing because I recently did a bonus movie on the Ace called Your Hunter of the Future. And one of the running things that movie doesn't address in that film that was really funny is that the main character, Yor, played by the legendary Red Brown, is that he inadvertently ruins like 4 or 5 civilizations. Like he leaves them all in like tatters every time he leaves it. Like it's like he keeps encountering.
Definitely seen movies like that.
Yeah, he keeps encountering new villages or new groups of people, and every single time it ends with the place burning down or something. And he's almost always indirectly the cause because he'll try and fight the bad guys, and he'll end up burning the whole place down. And the movie never addresses it. Instead, it just plays his theme song where it goes, "Yours world, here's the man." It's a classic. Anyway,
you and I have very different definitions of the word classic.
So, but regardless of that, she makes this choice, and on paper, I should love this choice because she realizes what her choice is doing, what her forcing this hand has done to these people, and that she's about to ruin the peace on this planet, and kind of representing the Federation. The whole point of the Prime Directive, in many ways, not that not that Vulcan really applies to the Prime Directive because they know about, the Federation
Everything.
and space, and they knew about everything before humans did. But the key part of the Prime Directive is not to interfere and make things worse or influence or force your philosophies on them. It's to let them develop on their own ways, blah 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 blah. Usual thing. And Michael basically picks up the weird bone thing that's ceremonial and says, I withdraw my request. I'm not going to let this, tear you guys apart, and walks out. And the brass, plays in the. And on paper, I should love this. Conceptually, I think this is in better hands. I'll put it this way. On the Next Generation, as if this was an episode of the Next Generation, where if Michael was a character on Next Gen, and this was the episode that made her sort of learn her lesson and make the correct choice and make the Picard choice and essentially make a Picard speech as she walks out saying, I'm not going to do this. This would be a 10 out of 10. This would be a 10 out of 10 on Next Generation. On this show, where it's overwritten and the character choices are so, like, flawed and frustrating to sit through, I just was like, oh, yeah, okay.
And do you know what's really frustrating for me is two elements. This is what I meant about the mother kind of doing the tough parent thing. Is like, this is what she's been trying to get her to reach all episode. This realization, right? And that's why she's been kind of going, oh, well, you're not trustworthy, and kind of not really going for it. And she's trying to push it towards this. But the real big problem that I have is I don't buy it. When Michael makes this speech at the end and she kind of does this decision, I don't buy that she's doing it to stop this civilization tearing itself apart. In the back of my head, maybe this is me being extra cynical, but I think this is where I am with Michael as a character, is she's looking at this and going, if I offer to walk away and just pretend to be the good guy, they might offer me what I want anyway, which ultimately they obviously do. She comes back with the information with the information.
I don't know about that. I never felt that, just because I don't know. If anything, when the information was presented, where the president decided to sneakily, behind the backs of everyone else on the planet, might I add, decides to just give her up this information for the end of the episode, I just kind of felt that was again a bit of like, no, I would have actually preferred she didn't get the information, and the choice actually stuck and actually again had a consequence, because she was essentially making a sacrifice because she saw what she was doing to these people. If she actually had to do without that information and they had to go and look elsewhere and, like, investigate through other means, I would have actually found that more satisfying. This was the magic TV of everyone winning. The magic way of everyone kind of gets what they want, and it doesn't feel like a tough choice was really made ultimately in the end, even if she didn't know that when she made this choice. I think that frustrates me. There's a lot of conveniences like that in this episode, and just a lot of TV. But ultimately, I have to just keep coming back to overwritten. It constantly was telling me it couldn't just let her make this choice and have her have this realization. It had to then have her talk about it with like 3 other characters, really analyzing what she'd just done and talking about how she's trying to, make Starfleet her home again and not leaving, and and all of it just kind of felt a bit muddy to me in a way that it doesn't feel like this triumphant moment of her walking out and making this choice where I feel like the character's finally solidified where she stands on something and finally aligns with like the ideas of Starfleet and the Federation in a way that's kind of like, because it should be like this. Oh yeah, she's finally had this moment. She's finally had this moment where it's, she talks a lot about being part of the Federation and like sticking up for the ideals of it and wanting to reform it to the precedents that it was. But ultimately,
she's a terrible example of that society.
She constantly flies in the face of it every single chance, and this was an example of her finally doing the thing that feels in line, at least in terms of the previous shows and what we think of the Federation doing. And doing it and being an example of it, and that should be immensely satisfying. And I think the show's writing is just so muddy that I couldn't even enjoy it. By the end of the episode, I was just so annoyed with so many little things along the way that by the time she made this choice, I just was like, okay.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. It's really frustrating because we were so positive on those first couple episodes, and I feel like now I'm just feeling the same way I did before. I'm like, it's so frustrating. Like, again, what I was feeling for a lot of season 2, especially, where I can really see the promise. I can see the great show in here, but it's just getting in its own way.
Yeah, because I think as well is that this episode actually does feel like the plot of an Next Gen or even an original series episode. I can see the episode of those shows where a few Vulcans and Romulans beam aboard, and they've got this ritual. This is one of those episodes that take place almost in like their meeting room, where they'll
Yeah.
just like, you know, set
I
it up.
feel like we've done like 4 of these
Yeah,
episodes with Worf already to where we are.
yeah. It feels like one of those episodes. But if anything, it feels like more like a classic episode in that way, in terms of the structure and the premise and just how sort of low key it is. And there's no big action set pieces. It really stuck out to me more so just how overly directed this is.
It,
At one point, she was walking with her mother down the hall, and for no reason, there was this extreme Dutch angle looking down the
it
hallway.
shines a light on the flaws because you're no longer looking at it as its own unique take on Star Trek. You know, it's its own show, which is especially I think season 2 it felt like it was trying to be,
Mm-hmm.
while still feeling more like Trek than season 1, right? Whereas now, when you have an episode like this where you could transplant this very neatly into next gen, for example, you see the flaws a lot clearer because you're like, okay, so when it's actually doing what those shows do, it doesn't do it very well.
Yes. Uh, and it's a shame, and I think that's, and I think it'd be frustrating on its own, but I think the fact that I can sort of take this decision and her making this choice, because we recently did an episode of Next Gen. It was about first contact, and ultimately, Picard and the leader of this planet essentially mutually decided that they weren't ready for first contact. It was more the leader of the planet, admittedly, but Picard kind of had to accept this and sort of leave it behind. And I think it's maybe just because that's one of the recent ones in my mind. But that sort of decision at the end being the smart choice that was right for the people of the planet, and that this choice that Michael made is supposed to kind of have a similar kind of feeling to it.
It's funny. I just mentioned your Worf episodes a second ago. There are at least 2 or 3 reviews that we've done on Worf episodes where the ending was not neat at all, and
No,
we have been surprised by how ahead of its time it was for just no, it's fine to not have a neat resolution, and yet here we are where TV is quite capable of doing that on a regular basis these days. This that is not that it's expected, but it's happy to do that when required. But Discovery is not. Like it's scared of doing that. This is it comes back, like say, you had to give everyone the happy ending. It had to have the data, that she wanted. It just had to be nice and neat. It didn't have that unresolved feeling.
admittedly, this is maybe, I don't know if this is something you necessarily want to fit into Star Trek, but Michael's story up until this point, where presumably we've had this turn now where maybe she's going to be a little bit different, but I was feeling it in the first half of the episode where she was making these choices, especially when she sort of forced the hand of the president with the I invoke this ritual thing, right? And Saru's immediately kind of pissed because he's like, wait, did you just like put her in a corner, right? I kind of felt like, imagine this was written by Vince Gilligan, right, and the writers of Better Call Saul, because that show is about a character who's constantly making choices that make us go, oh no, please don't, Saul.
They,
But it,
they're objectively the wrong
yeah,
choices.
but the character's so layered and so deep, and in the way that you're sort of like clinging to like this tragedy of all these bad choices is so well done, and I couldn't help but feel like that this is maybe why this fails fundamentally, is that all these choices that Michael makes that are these bad choices that are frustrating to watch, like in the hands of a better writing team, it might actually be a great character like analysis of someone. Uh,
Yeah,
but I think maybe part of the problem is that the show, because it's a Star Trek show and because it's a sci-fi action show, wants to flip to her just being the hero for a lot of the time and doesn't want to address these things
it
all.
does. And
So
something you just said a second ago is kind of it just kind of sparked a thought in me. You said we're kind of maybe this is a turning point for Michael now. This is the end
mm-hmm.
of her character so far. We did this already. We did this exact arc in season. This was her season 1 arc. This was the whole point of that season. Those first 2 episodes was she was no, she went off, did her own thing, and she had to learn. No, she has to be part of Starfleet. She has to be part of the crew. And the first couple episodes of this season, I was like, this, barring a few little details, could be just a first season of a show. And it feels like the writers are trying that a bit as well. Like they're going, should we just pretend it's the start? We'll just do the same things again, but streamline it a bit. And that maybe that's part of why this isn't landing for us so much is that we did this. We did this arc with Michael already, this exact thing. And that's so this is nothing new. She should have already learned this lesson.
Yeah,
She did learn this lesson.
and it wasn't particularly good the first time they did it either, which is maybe also hurting the potential of
That's the
this.
thing. I think this objectively, it's probably better this time around, but it's more irritating because why are we doing this? We already did it.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So the other plot of the episode is that Saru needs an acting first officer.
I feel like you're going to ruin this plot for me because I quite enjoyed this, but you mentioned something earlier about a
So here,
contrivance.
so here's the thing, right? I get why from a we're watching a TV show. It's probably the funniest and the sweetest thing for it to be Tilly because her fight,
I
her
don't know if I predicted this last week, but I definitely thought it last week.
right, her like being asked, and then the reactions of Stamets, like, wait, I'm gonna maybe take orders from you. That's weird and honestly kind of, you know, scary.
Not sure I like that.
Yeah. And it all leads to this big scene because Tilly's not sure if she wants to take it, and then like, all the crew are like, "Yeah, take it, take it, take it." Even Michael, when she comes in at the end, and she sort of misses this, goes, "Oh, did I miss the whole say yes
Say
speech?"
yes. Yeah.
Um, so this is all endearing from a character point of view as a TV show, but I couldn't help but feel, and Tilly brings this up herself. They do kind of address it, but they address it in a way that's like, yes, we know this is stupid, and that they would never pick an ensign to be acting first officer, but we're just going to hand wave it away because it's Tilly and you want to see this. And it's like, I mean, I kind of do, but I'm still annoyed that you're just hand waving it away and it makes no sense that an ensign is being asked to be acting first officer. It's like
Yeah.
nonsense.
It is a little bit. Like I said,
It's
I
just
think
nonsense. It's
no,
complete
no, it is.
nonsense.
I think the reason this didn't bother me as much as it clearly did you, and I get why it's bothered you, is because, like I said, I don't know if I actually predicted this when we spoke about the episode last week, but it was definitely in my head because, yeah, I remember that whole leadership track thing that she wanted to do. I'm like, okay, so she's the obvious, from a writing perspective, she's the obvious choice. So I think I was already resigned to it going in. Like I knew this was going to be the outcome. So when they kind of went through it, I didn't have those singing feelings of why are we doing this? You know, what are you doing? You know, this
And
makes no sense because I'd already gone through that earlier in the week.
there's not another good choice. There really isn't. If anything, this would be a good way to maybe get a new character on the ship where, okay, you're a new first officer, no one else is really. You can't have, Stamets is a big character, but it would feel weird for him to be first officer given.
It would have been a really interesting choice for them to give them someone from the present, right? You know, their future,
Yeah, yeah, that's
who
what I'm
knows
saying.
this world better. Who's like, no, I can be your bridge to the new
Yeah.
Federation.
Give him a new character, and I'm not saying that the show absolutely needs a new character, but that'd be a way to introduce a new character kind of naturally, and it'd be a good reason to have yeah, like you say, have someone who's familiar with the present in this world, and I say world,
Yeah,
not literally, but have someone who's familiar with this world. But also because there's no one else in the ship that really fits the bill. Like, there's no one that feels natural to be the first officer. Like, even if from a ranking perspective, some of the other characters who are like smaller are, it would feel kind of weird if all of a sudden, uh, fish
it's
looking
why
dude.
Tilly is kind of almost the only choice,
She's the only
other than someone new.
she's the only choice from the perspective of like timeshare and like the amount of time we spent with the character. But in terms of actual logic of like what her rank
Yeah.
on the ship and like who he should be picking, it makes no sense at all. And I'm kind of annoyed as well. And I'm kind of annoyed as well that we're doing acting first officer again because Saru was acting captain for a long time before we finally put the ring in the finger and said, okay, he's actually captain. Right, we've done it.
The one good thing I will say, I mean, the only reason is acting is so that we can give it back to Michael by the end of the
Yes.
season. Um, just to get that out of the way. But what I would like is maybe the acknowledgement over, not immediately. I think it's fine right now, but over the next few episodes that Saru made the wrong call. This was the wrong choice. This doesn't go well, and he has to face, he has to accept that. Okay, he's captain, but he's still making some bad decisions as well. I would kind of like to see, now that we've committed to Tilly being the first officer temporarily, I would like to see it go badly and Saru have to be like, okay, I need to make better choices.
We already did that with Michael. He made the bad choice and she screwed up. And now.
That wasn't the bad choice though, was it? That was the obvious thing because, like we've just established, Michael is the only other one. I mean, Michael was, it was either him or Michael for captain, so it was obvious that the other one gets to be first officer. To either of them, whoever ended up being captain, the other one was obviously first officer. There wasn't a debate about that. It was just, well, that's the case. That's what it is. Yes, it was the wrong choice, but not because he really thought about it. It was just because, oh yeah, that was what we do.
No,
This
but
here with
no,
him
but
actually making a decision and it being the wrong choice would
no,
be
but he
interesting.
he admitted last episode that he noticed Michael's ambivalence and reaction to when he was asking her and sort of pushed it through anyway.
Yeah.
And so he admitted that he recognized that something wasn't quite right and went through with it anyway. So he fundamentally made a mistake. He didn't trust his instincts. Um, so I don't think that, I mean, maybe she'll have sort of a rocky start, but I feel like this is going to be more about proving that he is following his instincts and he's making like kind of a wacky choice, but it's going to turn out to be the right one. And he, you know,
Mhm.
he made the bold choice for Tilly, and that's going to work out for him, and that's going to be like, yeah, see, Saru is a good captain.
It's very TV again, isn't it?
Yeah. There's just some really convenient and like we're doing this because it's the character we've been following and not because it makes any actual sense in the logic
I
of the
just
world or the plot.
I think, like say, a new character from the present would have been the obvious thing to do because you can even, and I wouldn't, maybe I wouldn't necessarily enjoy this, but I wouldn't begrudge them doing the obvious drama of no one on the ship really liking them, trusting them, being like, who's this random stranger kind of coming into our home, this community, that we've got
Mm.
here, and suddenly kind of ingratiating themselves at the top of the command and it being awkward, and you have the episode where he win, they win them all around, right? I can see that episode and like that it writes itself. Why are they not doing that?
I'm finding myself frustrated with this show
Again.
constantly. Just constantly frustrated. Sometimes it's just, writing tropes. Sometimes it's just taking lazy way outs, or sometimes it's just overwriting of character choices where it has to explain the choice like 2 is 5 times in dialogue or narration instead of just letting us see it happen and like actually, discover some of it for ourselves. And the show's called Discovery. Let me discover something. Don't tell me everything. Don't spell it all out constantly.
Yeah.
That would be nice. Um, so very frustrating episode, and despite the fact that again on paper a lot of this is in theory what I would have been asking for. In
I think
theory,
what's interesting is, don't get me wrong, there are still some maybe conceptual problems with the overall stuff with the burn that we'll get to again later in the
yeah,
season, I'm
that
sure. But
that's separate from this episode though.
yeah, yeah.
Really,
But right now, this isn't like, in past seasons we've gone, oh, Kurtzman just can't be trusted, right? I don't even feel like this is his influence, his decision here. This is just in the writers' room, collectively, all of them just not being up to par. Exactly, yeah, really, not where it should be. And I don't think he's the one personally responsible for these problems, as opposed to like, the overarching stuff.
hmm. So it's funny because I think conceptually this might even be a stronger episode in the sense that if it actually nailed what it was trying to do, I'd maybe love it. But
Mm.
last week, while it was also mixed, there was things I liked, there was things I didn't like. The stuff I liked last time, which was those character interactions, those conversations about what Michael had done between the other characters, I think are way better than anything in this episode. And I think that's why it was so frustrating that even all the scenes with the other characters and all their interactions this episode were actually frustrating me because it was just contrivance was the setup for everything they were doing. Um,
Yeah,
and it,
remember last episode where I said, the character interactions are pretty solid and they're the best part of the show. And
mm,
then this episode is like, yeah, I mean, even those aren't perfect.
so yeah, so it's sad. It's sad that the moment that I liked the most in this episode was the moment where it gave me a clip of Real Spock from Next Gen because that was the moment that actually hit a little feeling, it hit a touch, and it just made me realize how little I mean, I don't hate these characters, but how little the impact they've had on me compared to the impact Spock had on me. And it's this chasing of like you're following up these legitimately iconic characters. And I know someone in the comments might say, "Oh, it's because it's from the '60s and they're old. They've had all this time to build." I say bullshit to that because I think Next Gen did it again. I think halfway through season 4, I think Picard has established himself as just as iconic, if not more iconic, than almost any character in the original show.
Yeah, and I think you can watch our reviews of, the original series and Next Gen up to where we are, and you know, I came into those reviews having seen nothing but the Abrams movies. So I had no nostalgia. I had no, they've been built up over all this time. Now, original series only there's more episodes, but in terms of time, 3-ish years, right? We've spent this much time with the Discovery crew at this point, in terms
Yeah,
of just the amount of time in our brains.
it's chasing the dragon. It's trying to be something different because it doesn't want to actually look or feel like an old Star Trek show, but it's chasing the dragon. And just this small moment with actual Spock just made me realize just how there's the canyon of like mind share and importance and resonance that these characters have compared to characters from the old show. Uh,
it says a lot that I think the best character on this show to this day is still Pike. I think,
Mm.
like, I think he's far the most interesting character, and that was where, okay, they had a solid baseline to work from already, right? And I'm not saying that you know they didn't do anything, because obviously it wasn't like there was a ton of Pike stuff before, but there was enough where, okay, we have a starting point, and I feel like that really helped them, because easily, like, the most memorable in terms of just character for me was been Pike.
Yeah. Although I'm not saying that they should use characters from the old shows. That's not what I'm getting
No,
at
no,
here at
no,
all.
that's not what I was saying either. I wasn't using that as, "Oh, they should just do that." I'm saying it was telling to me that the one where they had the crutch of the starting point was the strongest. It kinda it highlights the flaws in the rest of them for me more than anything.
Yeah, but alternatively, I also think Spock was one of the weaker elements of last season. And I
It's
think
true.
that's an example of, no, this character's so established. I mean, Pike might even actually benefit from not being as explored as Spock, where he's kind of the perfect sort of level of character where, okay, you all remember him, he's got a little bit of importance in the history, but, he was never really given that screen time or that chance to shine, and maybe that's why it works a little bit better. I think
Yeah.
no one on this show will have any lasting impact as of yet. Like, nothing in this show has felt that way. Same with Picard. Like, obviously Picard has impact himself because of his history, but none of the new characters on that show have any lasting impact that are going to feel important down the line.
I mean, it says, as someone who didn't watch that show yet, um, I couldn't I literally don't know any new character. I don't know the names of any of them, whereas, for years there have been Star Trek shows that, that I've never seen. Where I could name you a handful of characters still because they had a lasting impact. And I know it's not been that long for Picard yet. Don't get me wrong. I know it's been what about years it's aired, but even while it was airing, I couldn't have told you a single name. Like, no one was talking about any characters. Where I'm like, oh, I can tell you something about that one now.
Anyway, this is starting to ramble on about larger Trek stuff.
It is a bit.
I just I don't think that this show has been kind of like a mixed bag from its conception. And this episode, I think, just kind of exemplifies so much of what about it does and doesn't work. Unfortunately, in this case, leaning far more towards the doesn't. But anyway, that's the episode. That's episode 7. So let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show and the channel, everything we do here, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv, and you can support us for as little as $1 per month and keep all the content coming. You can also, get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is us, so thank you once again. And, we mentioned it a couple of times there, but it is worth mentioning occasionally on these newer Trek reviews is that, yes, we are working through the classic shows. We started in January of 2017 with the original series, and we are currently just over halfway through season 4 of The Next Generation. So we're making that long, dare I say, trek through the entire saga. So it's exciting because it's not going to be that long until we start having to swap between Next Gen and Deep Space Nine. We're getting kind of close to that now.
Sometime next year, probably.
Yeah. So yeah, go and check out all that stuff. It's on the YouTube channel, of course. But thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?